After the family gathering, $50,000 was missing from my account. "We deserve it," my brother-in-law said. I smiled. Wait for it. Having you here listening to me means a lot. Watch until the end and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from. I'm really curious to see how far my story is reaching. I stared at my bank app, blinking hard at the screen as if that might somehow change the numbers. $50,000. Gone. Just like that. My hands trembled as I scrolled through recent transactions, looking for some explanation, a mistake, a glitch, anything. That's when I saw it. A transfer made yesterday, right after our family gathering. The same gathering where everyone had hugged me, laughed with me, eaten the food I'd paid for. My stomach knotted as I dialed my sister's number. No answer. I tried my parents'. Straight to voicemail. That's when I knew. This wasn't a mistake. I drove to Jessica's house, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. I'd always been the responsible one in the family. At 30, I'd built a decent life as an accountant while my younger sister struggled with one failed venture after another. Her husband Mark had never held a job longer than 6 months. And I'd always been there to help, small loans, paying for my parents' anniversary party, covering Jessica's car repairs. But $50,000? That was different. That was my business fund, saved over years of extra shifts and skipped vacations. When I pulled into their driveway, I noticed the brand new SUV parked outside. My chest tightened. They wouldn't have. Mark opened the door before I could knock, a beer in hand and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Amber," he said flatly. "Wasn't expecting to see you today." "Where's Jessica?" I asked, pushing past him into their living room. "Out shopping," he replied, closing the door slowly. "Something wrong?" I turned to face him, my voice surprisingly steady despite the rage building inside me. $50,000 is missing from my account. Transferred out yesterday. I expected denial. Shock. Maybe even concern. What I got was a shrug. "The family discussed it," Mark said, taking a casual sip of his beer. "We agreed it was the right thing to do." "You discussed stealing my money?" The words felt unreal coming out of my mouth. "Not stealing." He had the audacity to look offended. "Reallocating. You've got a good job, no kids. Meanwhile, we're struggling. Your parents need a new roof. Jessica wants to try her clothing boutique idea." I stood there, stunned into silence. They had talked about this. Planned it. While I was in the kitchen preparing dessert, had they been discussing how to take my money? "How did you even access my account?" I finally managed to ask. Mark smirked. "Jessica's your emergency contact. Has been for years. She knows all your passwords, your security questions." My own sister. The thought made me physically ill. "I want it back," I said firmly. "All of it. Today." Mark laughed, a harsh sound that echoed through the room. "That's not happening. It's already been distributed. Down payment on the car, deposit on a retail space for Jess, money sent to your parents. This is theft. I could go to the police." "And tell them what?" Mark interrupted, his voice hardening. "That your sister, who you authorized as your emergency contact, made a withdrawal? Good luck with that." He stepped closer, towering over me. "Besides, you really want to tear the family apart over money? After everything we've done for you? Done for me?" I whispered, incredulous. "Who was there when you broke up with Matt? Who listened to you cry for weeks? Family takes care of each other, Amber. Sometimes that means financially." His expression shifted to something almost sympathetic. "The family deserves this. We've earned it." I backed away, my vision blurring with tears. That's when I saw the shopping bags in the corner, designer labels I could never afford despite my good job. "I'll get my money back," I said quietly. "Every cent. Mark's smile was cold. Sure you will. Now, if you don't mind, I've got plans today. As he opened the front door, gesturing for me to leave, he added casually, oh, and maybe skip Sunday dinner this week. Give everyone some space to process. I walked out, numb. In my car, I finally let the tears come. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We need to talk when you've calmed down. Family comes first, remember? Family comes first. The words that had guided my entire life. The reason I'd worked extra hours, lent money I never got back, put my dreams on hold. I wiped my eyes, a strange calm replacing the shock. They thought they knew me, predictable, reliable Amber who always forgave, always helped, always put herself last. But they had crossed a line. And as I started my car, one thought crystallized in my mind. They had no idea who I really was or what I was capable of. And they were about to find out. Monday morning, I walked into Meridian Bank with a folder of account statements and a determination that surprised even me. The weekend had passed in a blur of unanswered calls and text messages from family members, all saying essentially the same thing: I was overreacting. It was just money. Family was more important. I'd like to report an unauthorized transaction, I told the bank manager, a middle-aged woman named Patricia who had helped me open my business savings account 2 years ago. Her face shifted from professional pleasantness to concern as I explained the situation. But that concern quickly morphed into something else, hesitation, as she reviewed the documents. Ms. Reynolds, she said carefully, the transfer appears to have been authorized. We have a signed form here. That's impossible, I insisted. I never signed anything. She turned her computer monitor so I could see the scanned document. There it was, my signature at the bottom of a transfer authorization, dated 3 days before the family gathering. Except it wasn't my signature. It was close enough to fool the bank, but I could see the differences. The slight hesitation in the way the are connected to the E. This is forged, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Patricia's expression was sympathetic but skeptical. You're saying someone in your family forged your signature? That's a serious allegation, Ms. Reynolds. Have you considered that perhaps you signed this and forgot? I did not sign this, I stated firmly, my finger stabbing at the screen. And I want to file a fraud claim immediately. An hour later, I left with a case number and the hollow assurance that the bank would investigate. But I knew the truth. It would be my word against the document. And banks weren't known for siding with customers over paperwork. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel as I processed what had happened. Jessica had forged my signature. My own sister. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. Your mother is upset. Come to dinner tonight so we can sort this out. Sort this out. Like it was a minor misunderstanding. I drove straight to my parents' house instead of back to work. I needed answers, and I needed them now. Mom opened the door, her expression a mixture of worry and disappointment. Dad stood behind her, arms crossed. Amber, Mom started, we didn't expect you until tonight. Who forged my signature? I interrupted, stepping into the house without waiting for an invitation. My parents exchanged looks. The kind of silent communication that comes from decades of marriage. Sit down, honey, Mom said, gesturing toward the living room. Let's talk about this rationally. Rationally? I repeated. There's nothing rational about stealing $50,000 from your daughter. Dad sighed heavily. It wasn't stealing, Amber. The money is being put to good use. For what? I demanded. Mark's new car? Jessica's latest business scheme that'll fail like all the others? Mom's face hardened. For your father's treatment. I froze. What treatment? The cancer came back, Dad said quietly. Stage 4 this time. The insurance won't cover the experimental treatment we found. The room seemed to tilt. Dad had been in remission for 5 years. This couldn't be happening. Why didn't you just ask me? I whispered. I would have helped. Mom reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Something didn't add up. Show me the medical records, I said. The treatment plan, the costs. Everything. Another exchange of glances between my parents. Dad cleared his throat. We don't need to prove anything to you, Amber. This family has always stuck together. When Jessica needed braces, when you needed college tuition, we made it work. Show me the records, I repeated, my voice firmer now. This attitude is exactly why we didn't come to you directly, Mom snapped. Always needing to control everything, questioning every decision. That's when I knew. With devastating clarity, I knew. There is no cancer, is there? My voice was barely audible. The silence that followed was answer enough. Dad looked away. Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. The money is still being used for this family, she finally said. Your family. I felt like I was drowning. You lied about having cancer to justify stealing my money? Jessica and Mark need help getting on their feet, Dad explained, as if that made everything reasonable. Your parents are getting older. You have plenty. So you forged my signature? Committed fraud? Mom's face flushed. Jessica did what was necessary for this family. Something you clearly don't understand. I stood up, my legs unsteady. Where is my money now? Distributed, Dad said flatly. And it's not coming back, so you might as well accept it. The living room suddenly felt alien, the photos on the walls, the familiar furniture, the people I'd trusted most in the world. None of it made sense anymore. You've always been selfish, Amber, Mom said, her voice cold. Even as a child. Always keeping score, always holding back. Selfish. The word hit me like a physical blow. I'd given them everything. Put them first for my entire adult life. I'm going to the police, I said quietly. Dad stood up. You'd send your own sister to jail? Destroy this family over money? You destroyed this family, I replied, my voice eerily calm. Not me. As I turned to leave, Mom called after me. If you do this, don't bother coming back. You'll no longer be welcome in this house. I paused at the door, looking back at the strangers who had raised me. I haven't been welcome here for a long time. I just didn't see it until now. Outside, the spring air felt cold against my tear-streaked face. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. Mom called. Don't be dramatic. We're family, we share everything. I got into my car, a strange clarity cutting through my pain. They thought they knew me so well. The reliable daughter. The forgiving sister. The eternal doormat. But they were wrong. I wasn't going to the police, not yet. Going to the police would be predictable. It would cause a scene, create family drama, but likely recover nothing. No, I needed to be smarter than that. I needed to understand exactly what had happened to my money, where it had gone, and how to get it back. And then, only then, would I decide what to do about the family who had betrayed me so completely. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? The foundation of my life had crumbled beneath me. My family, the people I thought would always have my back, had conspired against me, stolen from me, and then tried to gaslight me into believing I was wrong for being upset. By morning, I'd made a decision. No dramatic confrontations. No tearful pleas. No police, at least not yet. Instead, I would use the skills I'd spent years honing as an accountant. I would follow the money. First, I needed to understand exactly what I was dealing with. At work, I closed my office door and made a list of everyone involved, Jessica and Mark, obviously. My parents. Was anyone else complicit? I needed to know. My phone buzzed, Jessica again. I declined the call. Another text followed immediately. Stop being childish. Call me back. I put my phone on silent and logged into my banking portal. Thankfully, I had other accounts they hadn't accessed. My checking account had enough to keep me afloat while I figured this out. Amber? My boss, Richard, knocked lightly on my door. Got a minute? I quickly minimized my screen. Of course. Richard was in his 50s, a straight shooter who valued competence above all else. He'd promoted me twice in 3 years. Everything okay? You seem distracted today. Just a family situation, I said vaguely. Nothing I can't handle. He nodded, accepting this without prying. Well, I wanted to talk to you about the Westridge account. They're expanding their tech division, looking for investment opportunities. I'd like you to lead the analysis. I'd be happy to, I replied automatically, my mind still partially on my family betrayal. Good. Their CEO is particularly interested in startups in the food service automation sector. Apparently, his brother-in-law has a venture he's excited about. Richard handed me a folder. All the information is here. Let me know what you think. After he left, I opened the folder and froze. There, listed among the potential investment opportunities, was a company called Dine Solutions. The contact, Mark Reynolds. My hands shook as I read the business proposal. Mark was seeking $400,000 in startup capital for a restaurant automation system, kiosks, inventory management, staffing software. According to the pitch, he had a prototype and needed funding to bring it to market. Mark didn't have the technical knowledge to develop something like this. He barely knew how to update his phone. But the proposal was detailed, professional, and promised a significant return on investment. It all clicked into place. My $50,000 wasn't for Jessica's clothing boutique or my parents' expenses. It was Mark's seed money, his skin in the game, to show potential investors he was serious. I leaned back in my chair, a strange calm settling over me. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt a flicker of control. Mark didn't know where I worked. I'd kept my promotion to the investment division quiet around my family, tired of their constant financial requests. He had no idea that his business proposal had landed on my desk. That evening, I drove to Jessica and Mark's neighborhood, parking a block away. I watched as Mark left their house and drove to a small office building downtown. Instead of following, I waited. 20 minutes later, Jessica emerged, dressed up for a night out. Once she was gone, I walked to their house. I didn't break in. I still had the spare key Jessica had given me for emergencies. Inside, I went straight to Mark's home office. It took me less than an hour to find what I needed. Bank statements showing the distribution of my money. $20,000 to a software developer in India. $15,000 as a deposit on office space. $10,000 to a marketing firm. The remaining $5,000 split between Jessica's shopping spree and a loan to my parents. I photographed everything, careful to leave no trace of my presence. Then I found something else, emails between Mark and a former colleague of mine, Tyler, who'd been fired for ethical violations. They were developing this business together, with Tyler providing the technical expertise. In one email, Mark wrote, "Don't worry about the initial funding. I've got a source that won't ask questions. Family money, you could say." I felt sick reading those words. Family money. As if my years of hard work meant nothing. Before leaving, I did one more thing. I installed a keylogger on Mark's computer, not to steal anything, but to monitor. To know what he was planning, who he was talking to. Information was power, and I needed every advantage. The next day, I began my analysis of the Westridge investment opportunities, including Dine Solutions. I assessed each company objectively, looking at market potential, competitive advantage, team expertise, and financial projections. When I got to Mark's proposal, I was meticulous. I researched similar companies, evaluated the technology claims, studied the market. I didn't need to fabricate flaws. They were glaringly obvious once I looked closely. The technology wasn't novel. The market was saturated. And the financial projections were wildly optimistic. Throughout the week, I maintained my routine. I went to work. I declined calls from my family. I watched through the keylogger as Mark exchanged increasingly frantic emails with Tyler about securing the Westridge investment. "This has to work," Mark wrote. "We've already spent most of the initial funding." I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. On Friday, Richard called me into his office. "What did you think of the proposals?" I handed him my analysis, 40 pages of detailed evaluation. 3 of them show promise. The others have significant issues. He flipped through the report, nodding. "Very thorough. Your assessment of Dynright's solutions is particularly detailed." "I've seen similar concepts fail," I said neutrally. "The market's oversaturated, and their technology isn't innovative enough to stand out." Richard studied me for a moment. "I agree. I'll pass your recommendations to Westridge on Monday." As I left his office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "I know what they did to you. I can help. Meet me at Riverside Cafe tomorrow at 10 a.m. Alan Morris, attorney at law." I stared at the message, wondering who had told a lawyer about my situation. Then I remembered, Alan Morris was an old family friend who had distanced himself after a falling out with my father years ago. I texted back, "I'll be there." For the first time in days, I felt a flicker of hope. Not for reconciliation with my family, that bridge was burned. But for justice. For taking back what was mine. And if Mark's business failed in the process? Well, actions had consequences. That was a lesson my family apparently needed to learn. Riverside Cafe was busy with Saturday morning crowds when I arrived. I spotted Alan Morris immediately, tall and silver-haired, sitting at a corner table with a leather portfolio in front of him. He'd aged since I'd last seen him, but his sharp eyes hadn't changed. "Amber," he stood as I approached. "Thank you for coming." We exchanged pleasantries as the waitress brought coffee, but once she left, his expression turned serious. "I'm sure you're wondering how I knew about your situation," he began. "Your Aunt Catherine called me. She's worried about you." Aunt Catherine, my mother's sister who lived in Seattle. We weren't close, but she'd always been kind to me. "How does she know what happened?" I asked. "Your mother called her, looking for support. Catherine didn't give it." Alan took a sip of coffee. "She contacted me because she remembers the legal work I did for your grandfather's estate. She thought I might be able to help." I studied him carefully. "Why would you want to help me? You and my father haven't spoken in years." Alan's mouth tightened. "Your father and I had a falling out over how he handled your grandfather's trust. Your grandfather wanted that money divided equally among all his grandchildren. Your father made sure Jessica got more than her share." This was news to me. I'd been told the uneven distribution was explicitly stated in the will. "So this isn't the first time they've manipulated money in the family," I said quietly. "No," Alan confirmed. "It's not. But this time they've crossed a line into potentially criminal behavior. Forgery, fraud, theft." He leaned forward. "Amber, I can help you build a case, but I need to know what you want out of this. Do you want your money back? Do you want them held legally accountable? Both?" I'd been asking myself the same questions. "I want my money back," I said finally. "The legal consequences. I'm still deciding on that." Alan nodded. "That's fair. The emotional component here is significant." "It's not about emotions," I insisted. "It's about justice." He gave me a knowing look but didn't contradict me. "Tell me everything that's happened. Don't leave anything out." For the next hour, I detailed the theft, the confrontations, the lies about my father's non-existent cancer, and what I'd discovered about Mark's business venture. Alan took notes, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I mentioned the Westridge investment opportunity landing on my desk, he actually smiled. "That's an extraordinary coincidence," he said. "Not coincidence," came a voice from behind me. I made sure that proposal went to Amber's department. I turned to see Richard, my boss, standing there. Before I could ask what was happening, he pulled up a chair and joined us. You knew? I asked, stunned. Richard nodded. Mark approached Westridge directly last month. The proposal looked decent on paper, so they forwarded it to us for evaluation. When I saw the name Reynolds, I did some digging. He looked apologetic. I hope you don't mind. I was concerned about a potential conflict of interest. What did you find? I asked, still processing the fact that my boss was somehow involved in this. That Mark Reynolds has a history of questionable business ventures. That he recently came into some money he implied came from family investments. Richard glanced at Alan. And that his technical partner, Tyler Coleman, used to work for us until we fired him for ethical violations. I sat back, trying to absorb this new information. So when you assigned me to analyze these investment opportunities, I wanted your honest assessment, Richard said. And I got it. Your analysis was thorough, professional, and showed no bias despite the personal connection. That impressed me, Amber. Alan cleared his throat. Richard and I know each other from the Westridge board. When I mentioned your situation to him, he connected the dots. We've been building a case against Tyler for months, Richard added. He stole proprietary code before we fired him, code that appears to be the foundation of what Dineright is offering. My head was swimming. So this isn't just about my stolen money anymore. It's about corporate theft too. Exactly, Alan said. Which strengthens your position considerably. Richard leaned forward. Amber, I'm going to be direct. You've proven yourself an exceptional analyst. I'd like to offer you a promotion, leading our new tech investment division. I blinked, sure I'd misheard. What? Now? In the middle of all this? Especially now, Richard said firmly. You've demonstrated remarkable objectivity under extreme personal pressure. That's rare. But won't there be questions about conflict of interest if I'm involved in rejecting my brother-in-law's proposal? Not when we disclose the full situation, Alan interjected. Including the theft of your money to fund his venture. I looked between the two men, these unexpected allies who had emerged when my own family had betrayed me. What exactly are you proposing? Alan opened his portfolio. A three-pronged approach. First, we file for emergency injunctive relief to freeze any remaining funds from the $50,000 that was stolen from you. Second, we demand full financial disclosure from all parties involved. And third, we leverage the intellectual property issues to pressure Mark into a settlement. You think he'll settle? I asked skeptically. When he realizes that his alternative is potential criminal charges and a corporate lawsuit from Westridge? Alan smiled thinly. Yes, I think he'll settle. My phone buzzed with a text from Jessica, family emergency meeting tomorrow. Dad says you need to be there. 3 p.m. I showed them the message. They're getting desperate, Richard observed. Alan nodded. Perfect timing. They don't know we're meeting. They don't know about the intellectual property issue. And they certainly don't know about the documentation you've gathered. Should I go? I asked. Absolutely, Alan said. But not alone. I'll go with you. And before that, Richard added, we'll have everything in place legally. I'll need your formal statement about the fund theft to include with our report to Westridge. For the first time since discovering the theft, I felt a sense of real hope. Not just for recovering my money, but for reclaiming my sense of self-worth. My family had treated me like nothing more than a resource to be exploited. These men, relative strangers, were treating me with respect. As we finalized our plans, my phone buzzed again. A series of texts from Jessica. Answer me, Amber. This is ridiculous. You're tearing the family apart. Mark says his business contact at Westridge isn't returning his calls. Is this your doing? I set my phone face down on the table, a small smile playing at my lips. They're starting to realize there's a problem, I said. But they have no idea how big it's about to become. Tomorrow will be interesting, Alan observed. Yes, I agreed, feeling strangely calm. I believe it will. As I left the cafe with my new allies, I realized something important. My family had underestimated me my entire life. They'd seen my generosity as weakness, my reliability as something they could exploit. Tomorrow, they would finally meet the real Amber Reynolds. And I had a feeling they wouldn't like her nearly as much as the doormat they thought they knew. Sunday afternoon arrived with a heaviness in the air that had nothing to do with the gathering storm clouds outside. I sat in Alan's car, parked a block from my parents' house, trying to steady my breathing. You don't have to do this, Alan reminded me. We can handle everything legally without this confrontation. I shook my head. No, I need to look them in the eyes when they realize what's happening. I need them to see me, really see me, maybe for the first time. He nodded, understanding. Remember, don't get drawn into emotional arguments. Stick to the facts. I know, I said, checking my watch. It's time. We walked to the house in silence. The same house I'd visited countless Sunday dinners, holidays, and family gatherings. It looked exactly the same, yet everything had changed. I knocked instead of using my key. A subtle but deliberate statement. My father opened the door, his expression shifting from expectation to wariness when he saw Alan. What's he doing here? He demanded. He's with me, I said simply, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The living room felt tense, crowded with my family's presence. Jessica and Mark sat on the couch, my mother in her favorite armchair. They all stared at Alan with varying degrees of hostility. This was supposed to be a family meeting, my mother said, her voice tight. Alan is here as my legal representative, I replied calmly, remaining standing even as my father gestured toward a chair. Legal representative? Jessica scoffed. Are you serious right now? Mark sat straighter, his face hardening. If you're planning to threaten us with legal action over a family financial matter. It's not a family financial matter, Alan interrupted smoothly. It's theft, fraud, and forgery. All of which are criminal offenses. My mother gasped. Amber, how could you do this to us? Bringing a lawyer into a private family issue? How could I? I repeated, my voice steady despite the anger bubbling beneath the surface. How could you steal from me, lie to me, and then act like I'm the one at fault? We didn't steal, Jessica began. Don't, I cut her off. Don't lie to me again. I know exactly what happened. I know about the forged documents. I know the cancer story was fabricated. And I know exactly where my money went. My gaze shifted to Mark, who had gone very still. I know about Dynrite Solutions, Mark. I know about your partnership with Tyler Coleman. And I know about the stolen proprietary code you're using. The color drained from Mark's face. How did you? What your family doesn't know, Mark, Alan interjected, is that Amber works in the investment division at Meridian Financial. The same firm currently evaluating your proposal for Westridge Capital. Jessica turned to Mark, confusion written across her face. What is he talking about? Mark didn't answer. He was too busy staring at me with a mixture of shock and dawning horror. Your business proposal landed on my desk, I explained, allowing myself a small, satisfied smile. What an incredible coincidence, right? And I evaluated it, thoroughly, professionally, and completely objectively. You sabotaged me, Mark accused, finding his voice. No, I said firmly. I did my job. The proposal was rejected on its merits, or lack thereof. The market is saturated, the technology isn't innovative, and your financial projections are unrealistic. You had no right. She had every right, Alan interrupted. What she didn't have was an obligation to disclose her personal connection to you. But she did anyway, displaying the kind of ethical behavior that seems to be lacking in this family. My father stood up, his face flushed with anger. I think you should leave. We will, I agreed. But first, you all need to understand your situation. Alan opened his briefcase and pulled out several documents. We've already filed for an emergency injunction to freeze any remaining funds from the stolen $50,000. We've also initiated proceedings for full financial disclosure from all parties involved. He handed copies to everyone in the room. Additionally, Westridge Capital is considering legal action regarding the unauthorized use of proprietary code belonging to Meridian Financial. This is ridiculous, Jessica sputtered, looking at the papers in confusion. We're family. Families help each other. Families don't steal from each other, I corrected her. Families don't lie about having cancer to justify theft. And families certainly don't forge signatures on bank documents. My mother began to cry, but I felt nothing. The tears that once would have weakened my resolve now seemed manipulative, another tool to control me. What do you want? My father finally asked, his voice tired. Full restitution of the $50,000, Alan answered promptly. Plus legal fees. That's impossible, Mark protested. The money's gone. It's been invested in the business. A business that will never get off the ground, I pointed out. Not with stolen code and no investment. The room fell silent as the reality of the situation sank in. My family had gambled everything, my money, our relationship, their futures, on Mark's business venture. And they had lost. You've ruined us, Jessica whispered, tears streaming down her face. Are you happy now? The question hung in the air between us. Was I happy? No. I felt no joy in their distress. But I did feel something else, a sense of justice, of boundaries finally established. I didn't ruin anything, I said quietly. You all made choices. Now you're facing the consequences of those choices. We can figure this out, my father said, his tone shifting from anger to something approaching desperation. We're family, after all. We are related by blood, I acknowledged. But you stopped being my family the moment you decided I was nothing more than a bank account to be drained. I looked at each of them in turn. And I stopped being your doormat the moment I found out. What happens now? My mother asked, her voice small. Alan handed my father another document. This is a settlement agreement. You have 48 hours to decide. After that, we proceed with all legal actions outlined. And if we sign? My father asked. Then Amber gets her money back through a structured payment plan, and we don't pursue criminal charges, Alan explained. It's more than generous, given the circumstances. As we turned to leave, Jessica called after me. Amber, wait. You can't just walk away from us. We're your family. I paused at the door, looking back at the people who had raised me, who had shaped me, who had betrayed me. You walked away from me first, I said softly. You just didn't think I'd notice. Outside, the storm had broken. Rain fell in heavy sheets, washing away the last of my doubt and hesitation. I had done what was necessary. I had stood up for myself. And for the first time in my life, I felt truly free. 3 months passed like a breath of fresh air after years of suffocation. 3 months of silence from my family as the legal process unfolded. 3 months of focusing on myself, my career, and building a life that wasn't defined by what I could give to others. The settlement was finalized quickly once my family realized the strength of our case. They would repay me in monthly installments over 2 years, with interest. Not because they wanted to make things right, but because the alternative was worse. I didn't attend the final settlement meeting. Alan handled everything, reporting back that they had signed without argument. Your father asked if you would reconsider your position, he told me afterward. I informed him that my instructions were clear. On a bright Tuesday morning, I was in my new office at Meridian Financial, larger, with a window overlooking the city, when my assistant knocked. There's a Jessica Reynolds here to see you, she said. No appointment. My heart skipped a beat. I hadn't seen my sister since that confrontation at my parents' house. Send her in, I said, straightening the papers on my desk. Jessica entered cautiously, as if stepping into foreign territory. She looked different, thinner, with shadows under her eyes, her designer clothes replaced by something simpler. "Nice office," she said, glancing around. "Congratulations on the promotion." "Thank you," I replied neutrally. "What can I do for you, Jessica?" She sat down across from me, clutching her purse tightly. "Mark moved out," she said abruptly. "He blamed me for everything, the money, the business failure, all of it." I said nothing, waiting. "Mom and Dad had to take out a second mortgage to make the first settlement payment," she continued. "They're not doing well. Dad's blood pressure is through the roof." Was this supposed to make me feel guilty? I wondered. If so, it wasn't working. "I'm not here to ask for anything," Jessica said, as if reading my thoughts. "Not money, not forgiveness. I just..." She took a deep breath. "I wanted to see you. To try to understand." "Understand what?" "How we got here. How I never saw you, really saw you, until you were gone." Her voice cracked slightly. "You were always just there. Reliable. The one who would help, who would give, who would fix things. And that made me invisible," I finished for her. "Until I wasn't." She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. "I keep thinking about all the times you helped me. The rent you covered when I lost my job. The car repair after my accident. The loan for my wedding. It wasn't just the money," I said quietly. "It was the assumption that I would always say yes. That my needs, my dreams, my boundaries didn't matter." Jessica wiped away a tear. "I know. I know that now." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years of unbalanced relationships between us. "What are you going to do now?" I finally asked. "I found a job," she said, a hint of pride in her voice. "Nothing glamorous, administrative assistant at a dentist's office. But it's something. I'm learning to stand on my own feet." "That's good," I said, and meant it. Jessica hesitated, then reached into her purse and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you. It's not much, just my first payment. I wanted to give it to you personally." I took the envelope, surprised. According to the settlement, the payments were to be made to Alan's office, not directly to me. "I want to pay you back myself," Jessica explained. "Not just as part of the family settlement. My debt to you is different." I opened the envelope and found a check for $500, a small fraction of what she owed me, but significant given her new circumstances. "Thank you," I said simply. "I don't expect things to go back to the way they were," Jessica continued. "I don't think they should. But I hope. I hope someday we might have some kind of relationship again. A better one. A more equal one." I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or hidden agendas. I found none, just weariness, regret, and something new, respect. "That would take time," I said carefully. "And changes on both sides." "I know," she nodded. "I'm trying to change. To see people, to see you, for who you really are, not just what you can do for me." As she stood to leave, she added, "Mom wanted me to ask if you'd consider coming to dinner sometime." "Not now," she added quickly. "But maybe, someday." "Maybe," I acknowledged, neither promising nor refusing. "Someday." After Jessica left, I sat at my desk, turning her check over in my hands. It wasn't about the money, it never had been. It was about recognition. About being seen. About having my boundaries respected. That evening, I met Richard for our weekly update on the tech investment portfolio. Over dinner, he asked about Jessica's visit. "She brought me a check," I explained. "Not required by the settlement. Just her own initiative." Richard nodded thoughtfully. "That's a start. A small one." "Very small," I agreed. "But yes, a start." "And your parents?" I shrugged. "They want me back for dinner. Back in the fold." "And what do you want?" The question hung in the air. What did I want? For so long, my wants had been secondary, afterthoughts in a life spent meeting others' needs. I want to be my own priority, I said finally. I want relationships that add to my life instead of draining it. I want boundaries that are respected. Good, Richard smiled. That's progress from where you were 3 months ago. Later that night, I sat on my apartment balcony, watching the city lights. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. We miss you. Simple, to the point, with no demands or guilt trips attached. Another small step. I didn't respond immediately. I wasn't ready yet. The wounds were still healing, the trust still broken. But for the first time, I could imagine a future where some kind of relationship might be possible, not the old, unbalanced one, but something new. Something based on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. The next morning, I authorized a transfer from my newly replenished savings account to a business account I'd established. The money that had been stolen from me, that I'd fought to recover, was being reinvested in my original dream, a small consulting firm specializing in financial literacy for women. My first client? Jessica. Not as a favor, but as a business transaction. She needed help creating a budget and rebuilding her credit after the collapse of her marriage. I charged her my standard rate, and she paid it without complaint. 6 months after the settlement, I received an invitation to my parents' anniversary dinner. I considered it carefully, weighing the progress they'd made against the hurt they'd caused. In the end, I decided to attend, not out of obligation, but as a conscious choice. The dinner was awkward but civil. My father, humbled by the consequences of his actions, spoke little. My mother tried too hard to make everything seem normal. But there was a new undertone to the interaction, a caution, a respect for boundaries that hadn't existed before. As I left that night, my mother hugged me gently. I'm proud of you, she whispered. Not for forgiving us, but for becoming who you are. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even close to perfect. But it was honest, perhaps the first truly honest interaction we'd had in years. Walking to my car, I reflected on the journey of the past 9 months. The betrayal had nearly broken me. The fight to recover what was mine had changed me. But the reconstruction of my life, my career, my sense of self, had strengthened me in ways I never could have imagined. I had lost a family that took me for granted and gained something far more valuable: self-respect, clear boundaries, and the knowledge that I was capable of standing up for myself when it mattered most. The $50,000 had been returned, but what I'd gained was worth infinitely more. I had finally found my voice in the silence. And I would never let it be silenced again.